everybody, it's Franny, and look at this. We're back with the 308.
So what's going on, Franny?
All right, well, I went to unbox one of the shocks for the rear, and this is what I found. Take a look at this. This is all oil, and there's just a bath of it in here. It's just soaking wet. The entire thing is wet, and you can see underneath it, we've got quite a bit of oil there.
Yeah.
Sitting inside this packaging. My guess is that the seal on this is bad and it's just been under pressure and it just has been leaking out. So we're going to have to get back in touch with the folks that did this shock absorber, and we're going to have to talk to them and see what's up. Let me show you real quick what it should look like when it comes out of the packaging. So I unboxed this one just right after the other one, and you can see it's completely dry, looks absolutely perfect, looks super brand new. This is what I expect it to look like. So the other one, the front one that we've already installed, looked just like this as well. Let's go ahead and unpackage the other front one. That's the last of the four. And look at this. I can see some wetness right here already. Look at that. This one's just as wet as the other one. This one's soaking wet as well. No. These shouldn't have any oil on them at all. They shouldn't be all wet like this. That's 2 out of the 4, because the other front one that I've already installed was dry when I pulled it out, or I would have stopped just like this one. I didn't even think about it. So we're certainly have to contact the company, talk to them about it, and see what's going on. So the shocks finally came back, and all 4 of them are dry, so that's a good start. And I've already reinstalled this shock in the front right wheel here. I didn't want to bother you with going through that whole process again. But as you can see, we have quite a bit more. And that's Lou. Woohoo! Well, this is great. So I've been going back and forth with Lou Trottier because I always want to make sure I get this right, and Lou is awesome, and he's an actual bona fide real mechanic. So I had some questions about just how are we going to torque these bolts back here. And I was wondering, can we jack up the suspension here at the bottom to where it just barely lifts off the jack and go through and tighten all of our bolts? Will that work, or do we really have to have the wheel on and all the brakes and everything? And the reason I'm asking that is because these things up here, boy, these bolts up here on the suspension A-arms are going to be really difficult to get to with all this stuff in the way. So I really want to find a way to torque it without having to assemble all that stuff first. It's just going to make my life a lot easier, I think. So anyway, that's what I'm talking to Lou about. So let's see what Lou had to say. So Lou says anything that has a rubber bushing should be torqued when it's sitting in a loaded position. And absolutely. If you torque the control arms at full droop, they will fatigue faster because they are under tension. On the ground is fantastic, but not completely necessary. Just jack it up and get it close. All right, well that's great. So that's good to hear. So I think that's what I'm going to do, is just put something underneath this and raise this up. And I think we can get the rest of our bolts over here torqued up properly. All right, well I think that looks pretty good actually. The top A-arm is just down maybe 5 or 10 degrees at the most. I've readjusted my jack stand so it's going to catch the car at this height. The torque value I'm going to be using is 51 foot-pounds, which is 7 kilogram meters, which is what's in the book. From what I read, Ferrari torques their bolts according to the size and not as much the application, which I thought is interesting. So if they have a number 10, a number 12, blah, 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 they're going to be all the same. These are 12 millimeter bolts, and they have a 19 millimeter head on them. All right, well, let's go ahead and get them torqued to 51. There we go. That's the first one. This is so nutty. It's just going to take a lot of I have 2 different torque wrenches, and I have different sizes of sockets because they're both 19 millimeters, but one of them's much thinner than the other one because I can't get into this well without a thin socket. Then for the other bolts back here, I got this upper right one okay, but I think for the other 3, I'm going to have to use my torque adapter and my 19 millimeter wrench, I think. This is going to be something. Well, let's try to get this one down here on the drop link. We'll get that one sorted. That'll be pretty easy. There we go. Holy cow. And as I do these, I'm going to be marking each one so I remember I got them done, and then I can do a visual at the end and say, oh, yep, I got them all done. We'll mark this guy up here, and we'll mark this one here as being torqued on, might as well do both sides. This one has already been torqued. I marked the other side of it, so I'll just mark that side. These guys up here have been done. I'm just gonna mark them as well. Now let's see what we can do about getting to some of these other more difficult ones to get to. Okay, here we go. Perpendicular, here we go. There we go. Well, that is pretty difficult to do. I know I keep going off about this, but as long as these two are at 90 degrees to each other, the torque that the torque wrench is set to is what will be delivered on either end of the wrench. It's really easy for it to slip off these bolts too. They're kind of thin. I wish that the heads on them were much thicker. Now this one is an interesting thing. Somebody wrote in the last video, and they're absolutely right. You really should be torquing the nut side of the bolt and not the bolt side, because the bolt has all the drag through the whole assembly before it gets to the nut. But in this case, there's just no way I can torque that guy in the back there. There's no way I can torque the nut. I can get to the head, but I just can't get to the nut. All right, so that's 2 down. We have 2 to go on this side here. When this thing gets looking like this, it gets a little bit funky, most definitely. It's kind of gangly, and as you're pulling back on this thing, you have to rotate through an arc. It gets a little weird, but I just can't think of any other way to torque this thing. All right, well, let's give it a try. There we go. Yay. Boy, that is quite the something. Holy cow. Oh, we've got 3 of them done so far. That's super sweet. And we have our drop link on as well, so that's torqued. Okay, now it's the bottom left. It's going to be very similar to this top one, I think, because the only bit I can get to is the head of the bolt on this one. All right, let's get to it. There we go. Woohoo! We've got all 4 corners torqued in. That is super sweet. We're where we need to be in the driving position here. That's sweet too. It's still really solid. I mean, there's 0 play in this thing at all, which is nice. And you can see it still takes a little bit of effort to move it back and forth. This is really starting to look awesome. All right, let's go ahead and lower this back down and put our jack stand where it used to be. I think the next thing I'd like to do is to get to our front anti-sway bar. This is the original front anti-sway bar here. It's pretty sweet. Had it completely powder coated, and I chased the threads on here, so we should be all set with this. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like I can put it in from this side. I think I have to put it in from the left-hand side because there's some hoses that come down there, and this guy needs to go underneath those hoses, and that's pretty hard to work from this side. So let me go to the other side. I'll go ahead and push it in from the other side, and we'll get this in place. While we've got the opportunity here, I'm going to hit all these parts with a bit of silicone paste here. That's going to make everything go together a lot easier and help lubricate the rubber a bit. Okay, there it goes. And for our anti-sway bar, we have new bushings here, and I got the brackets plated as well. So it all looks really nice. We're going to lube these guys up, stick them on, and reattach this. There we go. The flange over the top of the sway bar here, I torqued that down to 40 foot-pounds. It's a little confusing. I can't find it in the manual. Those particular bolts I probably don't care too much. It's just a flange sitting over the top. But that size, that 17 millimeter nut, is somewhere between 35 and 45, so I split the difference at 40. So I think it's fine. It's not like it's going anywhere. I can't torque down the other end of the sway bar here until we, of course, have this thing back up again. But I don't want to do it just yet anyways, because I'm not sure how it's going to seat on the other side. And And this will be something that we can get to relatively easily when the car is on all fours. So I'll definitely leave it not marked so we remember, and I'll mark the 2 that I've just torqued. At this point, I'm going to add the ball link to the end of our steering arm here. Now, before I took these things off, I counted the number of rotations as they came off. So the right side, the passenger side, was 10 turns, and the driver's side is 11 3/4. So I'm going to put them on exactly that. 10 on this side, 11 3/4 on the other side, and we'll see where we are with that. Hopefully it'll be fairly close, but of course it's a brand new steering rack and blah blah blah, but at least we'll give it a fighting chance and install it the way it came off. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Here's something kind of interesting. Take a look at the difference between these 2 nuts. This was the original one that was on the car. It's the one I'm going to replace it with. This is the one that came with the ball link. It's really small, doesn't have a lock bit in there at all. And I don't know, I don't really trust this. There's no washer with it, so. Okay, we just need to line this up before I lock it down. There we go. Well, I think that's it in the wheel well for now. The next step is going to be to put all the brakes and such together, and we have to do the bearings on the hub. So all that I'm going to do on the workbench. Well, okay, this is a pretty good stopping point, so I'm going to cut the video off here. In the next episode, we're going to get to that front hub. We're going to swap out the bearing races, and we're going to lube up our bearings. We're also going to add our brake calipers, put our brakes back on, put the whole thing back on the car. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that now. Hit the little bell next to it to be notified, because you're not going to want to miss any of this. All right, well, thank you so much for watching, and as always, a very special thank you to our Patreon supporters. Until next time, safe travels. Bye!